Hi viewers, welcome to the course Indian Polity for UPSC Civil Service Examination based on Laxmikanth. This lesson deals with the chapter 3 of Laxmikanth, that is the salient features of the constitution. So which are the features we can look? First, lengthiest written constitution. Constitutions are mainly classified into written and unwritten. Written like the American Constitution or unwritten like the British Constitution. The Constitution of India is the lengthiest of all written constitution in the world, and it is a very comprehensive, elaborate and detailed document, and it contains a preamble, 395 articles and 8 schedules originally, but presently as of 2019 it consists of a preamble, 470 articles and 12 schedules. Several factors have contributed to large size of our constitution. They are the geographical factors such as the vastness of country and its diversity, historical factors, various acts that was bulky, single constitution for both central and states, and dominance of legal luminaries. Second feature is it is drawn from various sources. The Constitution of India has been framed after ransacking all non-constitution of the world, and the structural part is derived from Government of India Act, and the philosophical part, that is the fundamental rights and directive principles, were derived their inspiration from US Constitution and Irish Constitutions respectively. The political part, that is the relationship between executive and legislature, drawn from the British Constitution. Third feature is blend of rigidity and flexibility. Constitutions are classified into rigid and flexible. What is a rigid constitution? A rigid constitution is one that requires a special procedure for its amendment. For example, American Constitution. And a flexible constitution is one that can be amended in the same manner the ordinary laws can be made. For example, British Constitution. The Constitution of India is neither rigid nor flexible but a mixture of both. And for the amendments, there is an article called Article 368, and it provides two types of amendments. Some provisions amended by special majority of the parliament, that is the 2/3 members of the parliament of each house and voting, and some provisions amended by special majority with the ratification of half of members of total seats, and some provisions that can be amended by simple majority as of ordinary legislative process, and this is not included in Article 368. Next is federal system with unitary bias. The Constitution of India establishes a federal system of government. It contains all the usual features of a federation, that is two government, division of powers, written constitution, supremacy of constitution, rigidity of constitution, independent judiciary and bicameralism. It contains also a large number of unitary or non-federal features such as a strong center, single constitution, single citizenship, flexibility of constitution, integrated judiciary, appointment of state governor, all India services, emergency provision and so on. And the Indian constitutions are described by various people as federal in form but unitary in spirit. Remember, federal in form but unitary in spirit. And K.C. Were described the Indian constitution as quasi-federal, and it was described as bargaining federalism by Morris Jones and cooperative federalism by Granville Austin, and federation with a centralizing tendency by Ivor Jennings. So once more, and it has been variously described as federal in form but unitary in spirit, quasi-federal by Casey Ware, bargaining federalism by Morris Jones, cooperative federalism by Granville Austin, federation with a centralizing tendency by Ivor Jennings. Next feature is parliamentary form of government. The Constitution of India opted for parliamentary form of government rather than presidential form of government, and the parliamentary system of government is adopted from British Constitution. And the parliamentary system is based on the principle of cooperation and coordination between the executive and legislature, and the parliamentary system is also known as Westminster model of government, responsible government and cabinet government. The Constitution establishes parliamentary system in both center and states. The main features of parliamentary government are presence of nominal and real executives, majority party rule, collective responsibility of executive to legislature, membership of ministers in the legislature, leadership of prime minister or chief minister, dissolution of lower house. Once more, presence of nominal and real executives, majority party rule, collective responsibility of executive to the legislature, membership of ministers in the legislature, leadership of prime minister or chief minister, dissolution of lower house. Synthesis of parliamentary sovereignty and judicial supremacy. The doctrine of sovereignty of parliament is associated with the British Parliament, but the judicial supremacy is associated with American Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court can declare parliamentary laws as unconstitutional through judicial review, and the Parliament on the other hand can amend the major portion of Constitution through its constitution power. Integrated and independent judiciary. The Indian Constitution establishes a judicial system that is integrated as well as independent. The Supreme Court stands at the top. Below there are high courts. At the state level, under a high court, there are a hierarchy of subordinate courts, district courts and lower courts. This single system of courts enforces both central laws as well as state laws. Supreme Court is a federal court that is the highest court of appeal and guarantor of fundamental rights. Constitution has made various provisions for its independence, that is the security of tenure of judges, fixed service condition for judges, all the expenses of Supreme Court charged on Consolidated Fund of India, prohibition on discussion on conduct of judges, ban on practice after retirement, power to punish for its contempt vested in the Supreme Court, and separation of judiciary from the executive. Fundamental rights. Part 3 of the Indian Constitution guarantees 6 fundamental rights to all citizens. They are right to equality, right to freedom, right against exploitation, right to freedom of religion, cultural and educational rights, right to constitutional remedies. Right to equality, right to freedom, right against exploitation, right to freedom of religion, cultural and educational rights, and right to constitutional remedies. The fundamental rights are meant for promoting the idea of political democracy. They are justiciable in nature, that is, they are enforceable by the court for their violation. The aggrieved person can go directly to the Supreme Court or High Court, which can issue writs of habeas corpus, mandamus, prohibition, certiorari, and quo warranto for the restoration of rights. The fundamental rights are not absolute and subject to reasonable restrictions. They are not sacrosanct and be curtailed or repealed by the Parliament through a Constitutional Amendment Act. They are also suspended during the operation of national emergency except the right guaranteed by Article 20 and 21. Directive principles of state policy. Directive principles are a novel feature of Indian Constitution. They are enumerated in Part 4 of the Constitution. They are classified into three broad categories: socialist, Gandhian, and liberal intellectual. They seek to establish a welfare state. Directive principles are moral features. They seek to establish a welfare state in India. They are non-justiciable in nature, that is, they are not enforceable by the court for their violation. Fundamental duties. Fundamental duties are added to the Constitution by the recommendation of Soran Singh Committee by Constitutional Amendment 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act of 1976. And the 86th Constitutional Amendment Act 2002 added one more fundamental duty, and Part 4 of the 4A of the Constitution specifies 11 fundamental duties, that is, to respect the Constitution, national flag and national anthem, to protect sovereignty, unity and integrity of the country, to promote spirit of common brotherhood amongst all people, to preserve rich heritage of our composite culture. These duties are not also non-justiciable in nature. Secular state. The Constitution of India stands for a secular state, that is, it does not uphold any religion as the official religion of Indian state. Universal adult franchise. The Indian Constitution adopts universal adult franchise as the basis of elections to the Lok Sabha and state legislative assemblies. Every citizen who is not less than 18 years of age has a right to vote without any discrimination of caste, race, religion, sex, literacy, wealth, and so on. The voting age was reduced from 21 years to 18 years in 1989 by the 61st Constitutional Amendment Act 1988. Single citizenship. Though Indian Constitution is federal and envisages dual polity, it provides only a single citizenship, that is the Indian citizenship. In India, all citizens, irrespective of the state in which they are born or reside, enjoy same political and civil rights all over the country, and no discrimination is made. Independent bodies. Constitution of India provides several independent bodies such as Election Commission to ensure free and fair election to the Parliament, state legislatures, Office of President and Vice President, Controller and Auditor General to audit account of central and state governments, and he acts as the guardian of public purse and comment on legality and propriety of government expenditure. Union Public Service Commission to conduct examination for various recruitment to all India services and higher central services, and to advise the President on disciplinary matters. State Public Service Commission in every state to conduct examination for recruitment to state services and to advise governor on disciplinary matters. Emergency provisions. Indian Constitution contains an elaborate emergency provision to enable the President to meet any extraordinary situation effectively. The Constitution envisages three types of emergencies. They are national emergency on the ground of war or external aggression or armed rebellion as in Article 352, and state emergency on the ground of failure of constitutional machinery, Article 356, or failure to comply with the directions of Centre, Article 365, and financial emergency on the ground of threat to financial stability or credit of India. Three-tier government. The 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment added a three-tier government which is not found in any constitution in the world. Cooperatives. The three-tier government include the central government, state government, and the local government. Cooperative societies. The 97th Constitutional Amendment Act of 2011 gave constitutional status and protection to cooperative societies. It made right to form cooperative societies a fundamental right. It included a new directive principles of state policy on promotion of cooperative societies, Article 43B, and it added a new part 9B in the Constitution, which is entitled as Cooperative Societies, Article 243 EZH to 243 EZT. Criticism to the Constitution. Various critics raised several criticism on the framed Constitution. They are borrowed Constitution. The Constitution is borrowed from various sources. Carbon copy of 1935 Act. It is un-Indian or anti-Indian. An un-Gandhian Constitution. Large size of the Constitution and paradise of the lawyers. These are the criticism various critics have raised against the Constitution. Borrowed features. Let us see which are the features that we borrowed from different countries across the world to frame the Constitution. The structural part of the Constitution is borrowed from Government of India Act 1935. From the Government of India Act 1935, we have borrowed Federal Scheme, Office of the Governor, Judiciary, Public Service Commissions, Emergency Provisions, and Administrative Details. Federal Scheme, Office of the Governor, Judiciary, Public Service Commission, Emergency Provision, and Administrative Details. British Constitution. From the British Constitution, we have borrowed parliamentary government, rule of law, legislative procedure, single citizenship, cabinet system, prerogative writs, parliamentary privileges, and bicameralism. Once more, parliamentary government, rule of law, legislative procedure, single citizenship, cabinet system, prerogative writs, parliamentary privileges, and bicameralism. From the US Constitution, the borrowed features are fundamental rights, independence of judiciary, judicial review, impeachment of the president, removal of Supreme Court, and post of vice president. Fundamental rights, independence of judiciary, judicial review, impeachment of the president, removal of Supreme Court, and post of vice president. Irish Constitution. From the Irish Constitution, directive principles of state policy, nomination of members to Rajya Sabha, and method of election of president we have borrowed. Directive principles of state policy, nomination of members to Rajya Sabha, method of election of president. Canadian Constitution. The borrowed features are federation with a strong centre, vesting of residuary powers in the centre, appointment of state governors by the centre, and advisory jurisdiction of Supreme Court. Federation with a strong centre, vesting of residuary powers in the centre, appointment of state governors by the center, and advisory jurisdiction of Supreme Court. Australian Constitution. The borrowed features are concurrent list, freedom of trade, commerce and intercourse, joint sittings of two houses of parliament. From the Weimar Constitution of Germany, suspension of fundamental rights during emergency is borrowed. From the Soviet Constitution, fundamental duties and idea of justice, that is social, economic and political justice and preamble, are borrowed. From the French Constitution, republic and ideals of liberty, equality and fraternity are borrowed. From the South African Constitution, procedure for amendment of the Constitution, election of members to Rajya Sabha are borrowed. From the Japanese Constitution, procedure established by law is borrowed. These much are the borrowed features. Let us see in the next lesson with the chapter 4. If you like my lesson, kindly subscribe it, like it, share it with your friends. Thank you.